Just a reminder, today's conference is being recorded.
Thank you to our webinar today, Getting the Job You Want, Making the Short List. This is a particularly timely subject as many people are looking for new employment or are about to. This is brought to you by IEEE, Employment and Career Services Committee. Your hosts are Margaret Lyon, which is me, and Peggy Hutchison. We are both part of the IEEE ECS committee. Peggy, you want to?
Hello and welcome.
Our presenters today bring to us cumulatively more than 60 years of experience in helping people seek and find good careers and manage them. Ellen Sauter, Monica Suits, and Bob Stump. I'm going to begin with a little, because we are recording today, please put your phones on mute. It is important so that all the extraneous sounds are not a part of this recording. Send your questions to Peggy. Her name is over on the list of addressees on the left-hand side of your screen, and just note your request for questions to her, and at the end of our presentations, then she will field those questions to the appropriate presenters. So I think now we're ready to begin, and Ellen, I think you have some good things to tell us about setting a strategy for your job search.
I will try. Thank you, Margaret. When I was asked to present a portion of the webinar today on job search tools and techniques, I immediately asked if I could present on the topic of search strategy. I think this is a critical topic, and the most common mistake that I see candidates making is spending too little time on the most productive job search channels and too much time on channels that have a limited return or are just less likely to yield a new job. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on today. When we think about the job market, I want to talk about some numbers and percentages, because the reality is most new jobs are found through networking, over 70 to 80%. And some career coaches cite percentages as high as 85% for networking. Job boards, although we hear so much about Monster and Career Builder, are only the source of new jobs 10 to 15% of the time. Recruiters have an even smaller share of market, roughly about 5% today. Now, certainly all of those approaches need to be a part of an overall job search strategy. You want to be doing a comprehensive job search, but networking needs to be a significant part of your job search activity, as that will have the biggest payoff for landing a job. Now, these statistics surprise many job seekers, and especially more introverted folks who might prefer to do all of their job search by applying to jobs online, or who wish they could just send their resume to a recruiter and then sit back and have that recruiter hook them up with the perfect job. Now, certainly either of those scenarios could happen, but the greatest likelihood is that your next job will come from networking. So networking should occupy most of your time in the job search process. And for the rest of my 20 minutes, I want to discuss some realities and tactics for each of those three channels: recruiters, internet job boards, and networking. So let's focus on recruiters first. This slide explains the differences between retained search firms, contingency recruiting firms, and temp firms. I should say quickly that all of them are going to be paid by the companies. When they are paid, the fees they charge and the levels of positions they work vary depending on the type of firm, but in all cases, the company is their client. Now, recruiters don't market people. They fill jobs. And again, there's a common misconception that you can just find a recruiting firm that will market you to companies. But you actually don't want them shopping your resume around to try to get a job order or a search assignment, because if a recruiter presents you to a company, there is a fee or a price tag attached to your candidacy there, and you might have been able to network into that company. So you want a recruiter's help after a company has given them a position to fill and agreed to pay their fee. Now, recruiters typically won't be helpful if you're trying to change careers or change industries, and it's not that they wouldn't like to help, but if a company is paying a significant fee to a search firm or a recruiter, that search is going to come with some very tight specs that the candidate needs to meet. So recruiters are most apt to be helpful to people who are staying in the same type of role or the same industry. Recruiters have lost market share over the years with the growth and development of the Internet, which has given companies more, I guess you'd say, more direct access to the talent pool. Still, recruiters provide a very valuable service, and with downsized HR departments today and more limited HR budgets, companies do use recruiters to source and screen candidates. So recruiters definitely should have a place in your overall search strategy. So how do you find recruiters and be in touch with them? Well, certainly if you already have relationships with recruiters who might have placed you before, or recruiters that you've used to hire people, or ones that have been recommended to you by people in your network, you should certainly approach these firms individually. I think you should also expand your recruiter contacts by finding others that work in your industry or function. Now, this slide suggests some ways to find appropriate recruiters. The Directory of Executive Recruiters is an old line resource in most libraries, and you can find appropriate recruiters on LinkedIn as well. Now, as for this larger list, you really don't have to approach each one by one. You can do an email broadcast. I would put all of the email addresses in the box in the BCC field and include a cover letter in the body of the email, and then attach your Word resume. Even if they don't have an immediate match, recruiters will keep your resume if you appear to be in a field that they typically work. So moving on to job boards, there are three different types of job boards, actually I guess 4 types of job boards. There are the big 3, the major boards, that is Monster, Career Builder, and Hot Jobs. There are also niche boards that specialize in a particular industry or function, such as DICE or Computer Jobs for IT, or Opportunity Knox for nonprofit industry jobs. There are niche boards for every conceivable type of search. There are also aggregator sites like Indeed.com and SimplyHired.com that function as search engines, so you can set up a search agent on those sites, and it will search other sites to find jobs that match your specs. Now, this can be a real time saver. LinkedIn is also an aggregator site. You can see jobs posted specifically on LinkedIn, or LinkedIn will look at other sites, Monster, Career Builder, Hot Jobs, Craigslist, some others by now I'm sure, to find matches for you. There are also some paid sites that you might want to check out. Ladders and ExecuNet are both for senior level positions, for example, and of course you can apply to company websites directly. Now, there are sort of 2 sides to the whole Internet topic. One is posting your resume to websites, and the other is responding to positions that you see posted on websites. Now, some candidates are concerned about posting their resume out of fear of getting lots of spam and also identity theft. Now, you probably will get junk mail if you post your resume to job boards, but I personally would rather delete some junk than and miss an opportunity. As for identity theft, I don't know anyone who has had their identity stolen because they posted their resume to a job board. Typically, you don't even have to put your address on your online resume. You can leave your address off and just include a cell phone number and an email. You're certainly not going to include any sensitive information like Social Security numbers. And keep in mind that these are not public websites. You and I can view jobs on Monster or Career Builder, but we can't view resumes there. Only HR departments and recruiting firms that have paid big subscription fees can view resumes. So I don't see it as a high risk, and I am a proponent of posting resumes, but everyone needs to have their own comfort level with this, and that's just my opinion. Now, a few tips about job boards. On the major boards, you need to keep updating your resume at least every couple of weeks. Otherwise, recruiters will search by date and to see only the newest resumes, those that would most likely still be available. And I would say respond as quickly as you can after the job has been posted. Companies will likely receive hundreds of resumes within a few days of posting the job, and if you wait too long, they may never look beyond the initial batch. And apply to jobs that match your skill set only, things that are on brand for you. I used to say that if you could logically apply if you met 60 or 70% of the requirements, but with so many people responding to jobs online, I think that percentage today is much higher, 80% or more, maybe even 90%. So if you aren't really close to the stated requirements, it's probably not worth your time to apply. I think the biggest point to make here is just to use online postings as a clue that a job is available. Apply online, that's fine, but don't just leave it at that. Find a contact that can help you network in and get you noticed for the role. Now, on to networking. Here's a definition of networking. The term networking seems to scare some people, but it's really easy. It's just building a relationship, talking to people, or communicating online. And it's not you just asking for help. Some people aren't comfortable asking for help, but it's a two-way street. Just because you don't have a job right now doesn't mean that you have nothing to contribute to a relationship. You have great experience to share, and you will be helping them as much as they will be helping you. So a solid professional network of contacts will help you with your current search and will be very valuable in your ongoing career management. So we're going to talk about three types of networking: one-on-one or individual conversations with people, networking at group events, and networking online. So one-on-one networking. Early in your search, you should compile a list of all of your contacts, and this will include professional contacts such as former bosses and colleagues, vendors, consultants, customers, and personal contacts, friends, relatives, neighbors, even people who may not understand the work you do will likely know people in organizations that can be good targets for you. You'll be asking them to meet with you for a networking conversation that can be in person or by phone. And you'll want to grow your network through this process by getting introductions from your contacts to new contacts and through them to other contacts. And don't just meet with people once and then not contact them again, because if they don't hear from you, they're going to think you landed. So stay in touch with them throughout your search and let them know when and where you land. Now, group networking, going to group events, whether that's a trade association meeting or a job search support group meeting or just parties. Group events give you access to lots of people, and most times people come to group events expecting to network, so you'll find a ready audience. I personally recommend mixing it up a bit. In other words, some job search group meetings, but also events where some of the people are employed. You'll need your 30-second commercial or your elevator pitch, and we're going to hear more about that later. You should have business cards to share so that people have your phone number, email address, and a tagline about what you do so that they can follow up with you. Now, my suggestion is, as you're planning your calendar, plug the group events into your calendar first, because these are held at fixed times, and then you can add other job search activities around those group events. Now let's talk about online networking, which is really still just building relationships, but doing it through internet-based tools such as social networking sites, online discussion groups, blogs, microblogging like Twitter, and personal websites. Now, online networking is just having a huge impact on job search for all the reasons that are shown here. I'm a huge fan of online networking, and in fact wrote a book on that topic with a couple of colleagues. In our office at Right Management, if 70 to 80% of people land through networking, we're seeing almost half of those now landing through LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the most important professional online networking site. It's not the only way to network online. You can find a full list of online networking strategies in our book, but it is a critical tool for networking. Now, getting started with online networking, on this slide I've listed some action steps for getting up and running with online networking, and hopefully you'll be able to download this presentation so that you'll have that for your activities going forward. And I guess just a few points to sum up. You certainly should be conducting a comprehensive job search using all of these channels, so recruiters, job boards, targeting specific companies that match your product and industry knowledge, and networking. But remember to spend your time where it's most likely to result in a new position. If networking isn't a strength of yours, then make it a strength. Do some reading. Get some tips from active networkers. Don't worry if you don't have a large network to begin with. You can build a network very quickly, especially with online networking tools. I hope that these tips have been helpful. Feel free to email me if you would like to ask questions, and certainly do invite me to join your LinkedIn network, and I wish you much success with your job search.
Hi everyone, this is Monika Suits, and I'm president of Signature Strategies. I'm very pleased to present to you today regarding your elevator speech. The elevator speech is a very viable networking tool, and while it may seem daunting at first, the more you work on it, the better you become at delivering it. So I encourage everyone to take some time as they're developing the elevator speech to practice on your friends, your neighbors, the cashier at the grocery line, wherever you are. The more you practice, the easier it will become for you to say it in those important opportunities. The purpose of the elevator speech is to teach and recall introductions and establishing yourself as a value to the potential employer or that potential contact for the purpose of creating a positive first impression in the time that it takes to ride an elevator. Why should you develop your speech? Developing your own elevator speech puts you in charge of your career. You control the first impression. You convey confidence, and you articulate the value that that firm is going to receive by having you on their team. Elevator speeches are a very versatile tool that you can apply in most situations, professional and personal. If you're trying to develop a network, which Ellen is emphasizing is an important tool in the job search, or whether you're trying to secure a job or project internally or externally, or if you just need to make fast-track connections, you're at a professional organization meeting, you're at a career fair, or you have to make a cold call. The more you prepare, the more you practice, the better that elevator speech is going to work for you. So what's the difference between an elevator speech versus your traditional conversation? An elevator speech is going to give the highlights of not only who you are, but it's going to allow you to provide your immediate value. A traditional conversation can put us in a position of taking too long to be able to express our value to that listener. Your elevator speech can run as short as 8 seconds and as long as 3 minutes, depending on the situation that you're in. So what is an elevator speech? An elevator pitch, as defined by Robert Pagarini, says it's a concise, carefully planned, and well-practiced description about you or your project that your mother would be able to understand in the time it would take to write up an elevator. So in other words, concise, few words, very powerful description, short time, people have a quick understanding immediately of how you're of value and benefit to them or their firm. It's effective, it's simple, it's a great way to initiate conversation that provide a positive first impression and leave a lasting impression. It's also the port to continuing that conversation either at that moment or to designate an appointment time for a future conversation. An elevator speech is not a sales pitch. This is not the time to tell the listener how great you are or to engage in a lengthy, self-serving conversation. In these situations where the elevator speech is appropriate, the listener is looking for immediate benefit or value or a rationale as to why they want to continue this conversation with you. The key to developing an intriguing elevator speech, it's developing words, action statements, and a story that are going to prompt people to spend more time with you. The value of the elevator speech is that it connects you to the listener. By creating a positive impression, you're going to lend to a memorable exchange, you're going to connect your value to them, building rapport, and creating that future opportunity. So how are we going to accomplish this great elevator speech? First, we're going to focus on a concise description of your qualifications, strengths, and accomplishments, highlighting your value to the project at hand or to the employer over any other candidate that might be in consideration. This requires a pre-action plan. Pre-planning your elevator speech is an effective tool to outlining not only your strengths and value, but to identify those opportunities where your elevator speech can be presented. You need to know yourself, know your audience. Give some time in identifying your audience. Is it internal or external? If it's in-house, is it just in your division, or should another division be aware of the strengths and benefits that you bring to the company? If it's external, always make certain that that client contact knows who and what you're about. Make certain that they understand the value that you're presenting, not only to that project at that particular time, but at any time. Make sure to list your key strengths. Pull out some adjectives to attach to those key strengths. and develop a description of what you're trying to let others know about you. From there, you can develop your statement of your interest in the company, your industry, or a particular project. Components of the elevator speech, in brief: who you are, the knowledge and experience that you offer, problems you have solved, the main contributions you can make, and a listener's call to action. Here's a key point in your elevator speech. You have to make certain that you follow this line of developing your elevator speech. If you go through and you tell them who you are, your knowledge, problems that you've solved, but you don't ask them to take an action based upon what you've told them, then the elevator speech doesn't have a point. You're going to put up a barrier, shut a door to future opportunity. So make certain they know who you are, they know your knowledge and experience, they understand some problems that you've solved, they understand the contributions you can make, and you've opened the door for a call to action. So let's go through a case study on how to develop your elevator speech. There are 5 steps to pre-planning your elevator speech. 1, know yourself, who you are, your name, credentials, your position, your knowledge, the value that you bring to that particular situation and overall, and problems you have solved. You want to make sure that the listener understands what they should do as a result of hearing your message. Identify the opportunities and then the purpose of your speech. Are you wanting to increase awareness of the value that you bring in your own company? Are you trying to position yourself for in-house advancement? Are you trying to bring about future opportunities with particular projects? Other opportunities include professional organizations. If you're going to a professional conference, not only are you going to meet with vendors, but you're going to meet with clients as well. So you want to make sure that you're able to pull out the appropriate elevator speech that fits that opportunity. And as Ellen mentioned, networking, whether it's electronic or face-to-face, this is a wonderful opportunity for you to identify, develop, and maintain relationships that are going to move you forward. Third, make sure that you use the purpose to identify the focus of your message and the time that you're going to spend. Is the purpose to let them know of your credentials, such as programming expertise? Then you're going to want to make certain that they understand not only are you a programming specialist, but here are the credentials attached. It validates that statement. And then you also want to provide them with some examples of the outcome. 4, to develop a message for each opportunity and purpose that you've listed in your action plan. Your credential value, perhaps you've designed complex programming that's easy to understand and use. But if you want to take it a step further, you can say that you designed programming that allowed the user to decrease project time and maximize employer skills, thus positioning yourself as authority in a field. And 5th, always use a closer statement. This is where you can build the call to action. You want to tell them that it was a pleasure meeting them. You want to thank them for the time, hope that they have a good day. And you want to also give them a gift, such as a business card, handshake, and smile. And it is at this point that you would ask them questions such as, who do you suggest in your organization that I contact? When would be a convenient time for me to follow up regarding this opportunity? Always leave a conversation with a call to action. When you introduce yourself, make certain that you put that other person at ease by smiling, greeting, giving them a handshake, then transition into your statement. Then you're going to captivate them. You're going to tell them what you do, such as I identify and create opportunity. It's enough information to pique their interest, but not so much information that you overwhelm them with the situation. And then you're going to satisfy how you captivated their attention. I developed and managed 2 specialty niche companies within an organization. The background of the elevator speech is to provide an effective yet simple format to initiate conversations to create understanding and interest in you. It's a simple format to initiate conversations, and it's an effective way to continue a relationship. Then you're going to close. In the conversation with your interest in the company, position, or future opportunity, ask about their follow-up and hiring process, such as, how would you suggest that I contact someone in your organization? What are the next steps? What is the best way for me to learn about future opportunities? Make certain that you not only give, but you obtain a business card. Close with that firm handshake and thank them. So in summary, make certain that you communicate clearly and with purpose. Make sure that you've created an understanding or value to the listener, and then make certain that you create win-win, which is securing future opportunity for you and a valuable resource for the listener. Make sure you practice, 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 and make certain you have fun. Next, we're going to hear from Robert.
Good afternoon, or good morning, whichever you happen to be listening. This is Bob Stump. I'm also with Right Management, and I want to thank Monica and Ellen for those great tips on what your overall strategy ought to be and your elevator speech. Now, what I want to talk about today are 2 things that how you get people's attention and get to that start that interview process. First is that we're going to deal with the resume, and then we're going to start talking about phone calls. So let's talk about a resume. Why do you do one? It's got one purpose if you're using it to apply for a position. What you want to do is to get to an interview. A resume can also be a leave behind in case you meet with somebody and they say, oh, by the way, do you have a resume? But it's the first task of the resume to get you from that advertisement to an interview. And frankly, it's your advertising copy. It's the thing that's going to get somebody's attention to the point where they're going to put you on the pile of people that they want to follow up with. So what's going to happen to it once you submit it? It's going to be scanned. It's going to be scanned either by a person or by a piece of software. If a person's going to look at it, they might spend 25, 30 seconds looking at it, and they're going to decide whether they want to look at it further or pass it along to a hiring manager. The key here is that the individual has got a job description in front of them. Very often there's somebody who works in the human resource department rather than in the technical area of the job. So they've got this position description, and it's got words in it. And then they're going to look at your resume, and they want to see whether you're describing yourself as someone who matches the description. So people ask me, should I have 2 or 3 versions of the resume? And I'm not sure that's the right answer to think about different versions. But think about how, when you look at the job announcement, do you have the same words describing your skills, abilities, talents, and experiences that are used in the job announcement? Because that's what either the software or the person is looking for. And different pieces of software have different formulas and algorithms in them, so you're really not entirely certain what it's, how it's going to be doing the analysis. The key is to get their attention and to come across as someone who is familiar with and knows how to do the job that's advertised. So let's think about this person who's reading it. Quite frankly, my first reaction when I pick up a resume is I say, do I really want to read this thing? And my answer is no, if it's got the very small type, there are no decent margins on it, no white space. If it's very dense and packed, And if it's more than 2 pages, you got to get your message across in 2 pages. And even people who have a lot of experience, many years of experience, we're really probably only going to be thinking about what have you done for the last 15 to 20 years. So you don't have to tell me your whole life story in your resume. And like the top of the newspaper, it's the top half of the first page. That's where you have to grab me. And that's where your first summary statement's going to be, which we'll talk about in a minute, as well as the description of your most recent employment. So your summary statement. This is where you're going to state the case for who you are and what you can do for me as your potential employer. So what is it? Who are you? What's your brand? What are some of the specific expertise that you bring to your job? And then what are some of the soft skills that you've got in terms of being able to get along with people or being a good communicator, problem solver, things like that. And then give me some sense of how you had an impact as a professional or as an employee in the kind of position that you hold. So you have to kind of cover those 4 things. Who am I? What can I do technically? What kind of interpersonal interactions do I have with folks? And then finally, what impact have I had? And here is an example. This person is a senior software engineer. That's their brand. Their hard skills are product development, the product development life cycle, all the way from beginning to end. They have some soft skills in terms of problem solving and communication, and their impact is they've been able to enhance branding, hard skills, soft skills, impact. Not necessarily, branding should be first. The other 3 can be in pretty much any order you want. But really you have in your summary all 4 components. Now you've stated your case, now you have to prove it. You have to show it. So here's where you get into your work experience. In a chronological resume, oh, by the way, I'm only talking about chronological resumes here, not functional resumes. If somebody wants to ask about that later, I can give you what the difference is and what the use is for. Anyway, chronological resume, you're going to list your work experience in reverse chronological order. I'm going to want to know on the first line, who was the employer, where was it, and how many years what years did you work there? We don't believe that you have to put in the months. It's just 2003 to 2010, not March of 2003 to April of 2010, 2003 to 2010. Then the position that you had in that organization. Now, if you had more than one position, then you can list them sequentially, again in reverse chronological order, but put the years you were in that position after each title. And then for each title, there's a brief scope of what you've done. 3 to 5 lines that just talk about what were the scope of your responsibilities. How many people did you supervise? What size of the budget? What kind of tasks and functions did you perform? Those kinds of things. And then for each one of your positions, you want to have some bullets that are accomplishments, things that you did within while you're in that position. And we have a format to suggest that you talk about what was the result of what you did and what was the action you took to produce that result. How many bullets? Well, a guideline is maybe 1 for every year you were in that position. If you were there only 1 year, maybe you might have 2. If you were there for 15 years, you might not have 15, but you would only. So it varies, but don't just dump a million bullets on the job that you've been doing. So this is what it looks like. Here's the person, the company name, the place, and the years they were there. Their title was they were an operations manager, the scope of what they did in terms of the size of the operation, and then we had 3 bullet accomplishments. Notice that the result is first. In the first bullet it says the result was they reduced shipping errors by 20%, okay, and improved inventory turn by 15%. How? Through barcoding system that was installed within 60 So it's results first and then the actions. This is something that a lot of people have trouble with. In fact, some people, it may be very easy to have a quantifiable number, a result as in this case, or it may be something that's not quite as quantifiable. You may only be able to say increased market share or improve the communication process, things like that, that when there isn't a good quantifiable indicator that's used. But to the extent that you've got a number, you're better off. So how do you strengthen them? There's an accomplishment statement that's really blah, doesn't really tell me very much. Well, this is a little bit better. I conducted more than 45 training programs and reduced customer complaints. Notice the format is the action first, then the result. To make that better, flip them. Put the result first, get my attention, because now I know this is a person who is going to produce for me because they have a track record of producing in former employment situations. A lot of people have very technical skills, and if you're in the world of information technology, the potential employers want to know what are the hardwares and softwares and platforms and architecture that you have worked with. So a really neat way to do it is to put the categories over here in a left-hand column of a table, and then put the details of what those either operating systems or software in the right-hand column of a table. And then in Word, you just get rid of the lines. So it comes out nice, neatly squared off like this. It's an option as to whether this technical skills section would go at the beginning of a resume after the summary, or whether it goes at the end. A lot of people in information technology tell me that employers really do want to see this kind of information up front, because they really want to know what was the hardware, software platforms that you are familiar with and can work with. So it may be that you put it up front, or you may put it back after your work experience. That's a judgment call. There's no one answer for that one. Then your education, professional development. Again, your highest level, and if you will, reverse chronological order. And these other kinds of activities are all there. What are the ones that make a difference for the kind of position that you're applying to become? So here's a master's degree, a bachelor's degree. Here's some professional development they took, and here are some certifications that this person had. Professional development certification. That kind of information comes toward the end. Some people ask me, what about my community activities, or what about some of my volunteer activities? That, again, is a judgment call. To the extent that those other activities in your life are relevant to the skills, abilities, and talents that are called for in the job, you may include them. Particularly, you might also have some professional associations that you belong to that you want to include, again, to the extent that they are relevant to the kind of position you're applying for. So you've got your resume there. Now it's time to analyze it. Ask yourself these questions. This is kind of like a checklist. You do not want to lie on a resume. Nothing will get you disqualified or perhaps even fired than someone who when someone finds out that you have not been truthful. That's part of the reason why you really want to write this, get yourself to write the resume, even though it may be difficult, and yes, you can have help and people give you advice. But you want to be able to stand up and explain every single word and the phrase in that resume. So it's got to be yours. You can't have somebody ask, well, what does this mean? And you go, well, yes, I'm not quite sure. You have to be able to emphasize and to be able to respond to their questions about what you put there. Most recent work experience is what's important. Got to watch out for the use of jargon. Perhaps in your former employment you use some different kind of buzzwords. Be careful that you try and translate that into something that the more general public would understand. Do it yourself. Fancy things as this poor person going through the screen is looking at all these. If they have to unfold a piece of paper, that takes them more time. If you're real clear as to what you're trying to do and you make your points quickly and do it in 2 pages, that's what's going to allow this person to be disposed to saying, okay, this person knows what they're doing, let's get them in here. But if they have to fumble around to find out who you are and what you've got, then it's going to make it difficult. And yes, avoid the personal pronouns. A, they're self-serving, and B, they take up space. And you can be very careful about the words you use. I get a million resumes, can't have too big a number. Many people talk about the fact that they led a project and spell it L-E-A-D. L-E-A-D is the substance. L-E-D is the past tense of the verb, and you always use. Our eyes, when we read something, go from left to right in the English language. So you want to have the important things on the left-hand side. That's why I would also always put the dates over on the right and save the left-hand side for your employer's name and your name, your position name. And think about using action verbs. Don't ever use the past tense. Excuse me, passive voice. Don't use the passive voice. Always use the past tense for a previous job. If you use abbreviations, spell them out the first time. But if you only use a term once, don't just do it abbreviation. Just spell it out. Don't bother with the abbreviation. But make sure, don't assume that I'm going to know what those 3 or 4 letters mean. And if there's anything that turns a reader off or can screw up the word match that the piece of software is doing, it's these kinds of errors. Very, very important to have many people or several people read your resume to look for typos and grammatical issues. Don't just rely on spell check, because it's not a spell check. It's a typo check. If you write L-E-A-D for the past tense of the verb, it's not going to get flagged by the software. So those are some ideas about how to strengthen your resume. Let's move on now to talk a little bit about the phone interview. Submitted your resume. It's been screened. It made it, because you followed this advice, you've made it to the let's call them pile, and somebody's going to probably call you. Again, somebody often from the HR department, as opposed to the technical area that you've applied to, is going to call you and do an initial screening. Here they're trying to just kind of verify that you have what they're looking for. And again, your purpose here in this initial interview, the phone interview, is to get a face-to-face interview. So if it's done by someone in the HR field, they're not necessarily going to be technologically savvy or technically savvy with what this area is. So be careful using a lot of jargon. Be careful of not talking down to them. This is a person who's got a series of questions and a checklist that he or she has to go through, and you just want to be able to meet that. Now, by the time you talk to this person, you may already have made a first impression. Namely, they may have called you and gotten your voicemail. So if you have a toddler who's just gotten real excited about, can I leave my voice on the message, you might want to suspend that for your position of, or your duration of your job search, because you don't want funny music. I had one voicemail that I called, and I got 15 seconds of very hard rap music before I was able to leave my message. Those things make impressions, and sometimes they're not positive. Think about whether you want, how you want to use your cell phone. Do you want to have somebody call you for a screening interview while you're in the checkout counter at the grocery store, sitting in the doctor's waiting room, or something like that, or even just driving down the road? So think about whether you want to use your cell, and if somebody does call you at an inopportune time, how you're going to. If you don't know, in today's world, if you don't know something about the business of the company that you've applied to, it's not going to help you at all. You're probably not going to get the job. So you're going to have to you're going to have to do your research at before you do the application, before you do the submission, or immediately thereafter, because you don't know when you might get called. But you want to come across even to the initial screener as somebody who knows what this business is all about, that you're interested in. Google and LinkedIn and all these other search engines are wonderful. You can go there and find out details about the company. You can go to LinkedIn and look for somebody who's already in the company or was in the company and see if you can get a conversation with them. All sorts of ways that you can get more information across as someone who's done their homework. When you're talking on the phone, they can't see you. So what do you have on the counter in front of you or the table in front of you? You've got your resume, you've got your application, you have your calendar, you have your notes about what the company background is, all those things you've got. Now, if this happened to have been an arranged time for this phone call, you may want to be in a business mode and, get dressed. Don't be just sitting around in your sweatpants and slippers or something like that. Be positive, because somehow a lot of where your head's at will come through in the way you come across in the conversation. You want to be prepared for what you know are going to be some of the questions they're going to ask. And I'll show you a list in a moment of frequently asked questions. And you want to have answers to those before you get on the phone. If there are some parts of your resume, you maybe have some gaps, or there may be some things there, you want to have a good answer for them, being in a job for a very short time. You want to know the metrics and what's the methodology behind some of the metrics for your accomplishment. How did you gather that data in case they want to probe on that? Know what your salary history and expectations are. We could go on for a whole webinar on this topic, but by and large, the initial screener is going to want to find out, and you will too, as to whether you're in the same ballpark in terms of salary, because they don't want to waste your time, and you don't want to waste your time if you're not in the same ballpark. So you may not want to give them a number, but one of the ways, if they say, well, what are your expectations, very often people can say, well, could you tell me what was budgeted for this position? And I can let you know whether it's ballpark. So they'll give you some range that was budgeted, and you can say yes or no. Or you can say, well, based on my experience, and my research, this kind of position generally pays between this and this. And they can say, yes, that's in the ballpark. But it's not, you're trying to just get some sense of what the range is. I always like to suggest to people that if you know you're going to be asked certain questions, it's the frequently asked ones, also be ready for the couple of questions you really don't want to be asked, because you don't want to, again, stumble. And if you know what the ones are you don't want to be asked, and you are ready to give good answers, mentally you're kind of prepared for the best in the world. So here are some frequently asked questions. Tell me about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, why'd you leave, what's your management style, where do you want to be in 5 years? Those kinds of questions, maybe not in the initial screening interview, but certainly in a face-to-face interview, these are the kinds of things you're going to get some variation on them. Why do you want to work for us? Tell me. Tell me about the people you worked with last time. How would they describe you? And again, the salary question is liable to come up. So how do you get ready? Practice. We all have access to some sort of voice recorder. Take a couple of those frequently asked questions and answer them, and then listen to yourself. Listen to the tone and the pacing and the inflection, because we all know that the words of a message the content of the message is not carried simply by the words. In fact, the words are probably the least important. When it's a face-to-face conversation, obviously your body language, but when you're talking on the phone, it's the tone, the pacing that replaces or substitutes for some of the nonverbal body language things. So all those things are kind of important. So if you call up somebody and they say, hi, this is Bob. Hi, Bob. Or Hi, this is Bob. Hey, Bob. You can see the difference in terms of the message that's coming across. So you want to make sure you're coming across the way you want to. While you're on the call, listen very, very carefully. Let somebody ask their full question. Don't interrupt them ahead of time. Ask for clarification if you're not quite sure what they're interested in. Give them very concise answers, emphasizing the facts. Try and get your answer to their question in less than 2 minutes, and answer the question that's asked. The way you can then expand on that, if there's something more that you want to say about that topic, you can ask them if they want more information. But to be on the other end of a phone as somebody drones on for 5 minutes, this can be a fairly negative experience and would not put you in good light. So if you want to prolong the topic, you ask them, well, would you like to hear some more about that? So you keep the dialogue back and forth. Be very slow, deliberate in what you're trying to say. You may have some stickies on your desk or your table to help you remember what are some of the points you want to make for a particular question that you have. Again, be very, very careful about jargon in terms of whether the person on the other end of the line can understand you. Stand up. This might help your voice quality. Singers don't sing sitting down. They stand up because it enhances the voice. And by the way, the research says that if you're smiling while you're talking on the phone, that will come through. The friendliness will come through in your conversation. As you get toward the end of the call, be very careful and make sure that you understand what are the next steps in the process. Tell them you'd really look forward to meeting them in person. You really enjoyed this conversation with them, presuming you get some contact information, because you're going to want to send thank yous. Thank you, thank you, thank you. There is no way in a job search process that you can say thank you too many times. So you really do want to have the opportunity to get back to each one of these people, probably with an email, to just thank them for what they've done. Now, the next to last bullet up there on how you can contact them, one of the things that drives job hunters crazy is sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. So if somebody says, well, our next step in the process is we want to talk to a couple other people and we expect to be able to do that by next Wednesday, then you might want to say something like, well, if I don't hear from you by the end of the week, can I call? So you want to make sure that at some point in time you have an agreement with them that it'll be okay for you to give them a call to continue the conversation. So don't leave yourself in that power down situation where you're doing. The Coast Guard, we've all heard Semper Fidelis for the Marines. Well, the Coast Guard's motto is Semper Paratus, always prepared. You're going to be ready for a phone call whenever it comes, with that other caveat about you might be in the checkout line of at the grocery. If you don't know who it is, be careful. Until you find out who it is, you don't want to be gruff or rough or nasty. You don't want to have some sort of device that would prevent them from getting through to you. And every once in a while, call into your voicemail to make sure it's working. I've got a system where every once in a while it doesn't work, and it causes people not to have a very good impression of Bob. Why don't I hear your voice on your voice recorder? Not completely reliable. So make sure that it works for yourself. So that's the pitch on resumes and phone calls, and some tips I hope are very helpful. And now we'd be happy to entertain your questions. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Peggy.
Yes, thank you, Bob and Ellen and Monique. I want to just echo again what important information this is, and then to ask a couple of questions just to follow on. And I'm going to start with Ellen since we started with her. Ellen, you said that there are certain kinds of things that you don't do if you are a career changer, and you talked about this in relation, I think, to a couple of areas, particularly the use of recruiters. But what about networking when you're changing careers so you don't know that many people in your new career field?
Absolutely. Networking is going to be the key strategy if you're looking to do things that are very different from what you've done before because, as I mentioned, recruiters, though they might like to be helpful, probably are not going to be able to get a company to pay a huge fee for someone that knows they can learn it. So that's not a likely channel for career changers. Really, neither is the Internet in terms of job boards because there are so many people applying online today that your resume is not likely to rise to the surface for something that you haven't really done. So making a career change is almost always going to happen through networking. And if you don't know people in the fields that you're exploring, you can certainly use LinkedIn to find anyone in any kind of conceivable role or new market so that you can build connections and gather good information that can help you make some of those career decisions. Any kind of networking, talking to people, people in companies or in industries is how you're likely to surface the opportunities, and they can get a chance to see you and see all the good things that you've done and understand how you can help their business, even though it may be a little bit different from what you've done before.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Now I have another question for Monica. Many of the people who attend IEEE webinars are what we would call introverts. How would you recommend that an introvert get comfortable with a speech about themselves? That's even harder than making a speech about something else.
It all involves your pre-plan, knowing, identifying who you are. Then it involves practicing. Don't try to come up with a 3-minute elevator speech from the start. You can start from 8 seconds, practice it, 12 seconds, practice it, and then keep moving on. Don't add the information until you feel comfortable with those first 8 seconds. And once you practice and feel comfortable with those first 8 seconds, then the natural aspect of what you're trying to say, it will develop a pattern, a rhythm. And I think if they liken it to their industry, how they don't try to design the end of a program first, they have to set the foundation. And if they'll realize that it's something that really is very natural to them. And then the second important key is to put the emphasis on the person who's listening to you. If you take the role of trying to make them feel comfortable, to realize that your mission is to help them to create understanding, then that takes the emphasis off a person who has introverted tendencies for them to realize, I'm helping that person. And that's always provides relief.
Okay, so it's not all about me.
It is not all about you. And if everybody would remember that, it's really just helping that other person to feel comfortable.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bob, you set us up on this one. You said if you want to know about functional resumes, I'd be happy to give a couple of ideas on that later on. Well, I'm going to declare now later on and ask you about functional resumes.
Well, okay, yes, I did set that up. One of the difference between a chronological resume and a functional resume is that what you're trying to do in a functional resume is instead of highlighting who you worked for and what the jobs have been, you're really trying to highlight your skills, abilities, and talents. Functional resumes are most often used by the people that Ellen was talking about, the career changers, somebody who wants to do a very, very different kind of job or who wants to work in a very, very different industry. You want to move from the information technology industry as a programmer to you want to become a marketer in the petrochemical industry or something like that. When you're trying to make those big changes, then it's not so much who you've worked for that is that important in your track record in the industry, but it's what have you done? What are your transferable skills, if you will? So you go through and you think about what are the different positions I've had, what are the different accomplishments I've had, what are the different skills, and that information goes right after your summary. Sometimes you can categorize, like here's my communication talents, here's some of my technical skills, here are some of my problem solving, here are my customers, like that. So you could have some categories with bullets about each one of those. And then you list very briefly who were the employers and what were the jobs and when did you have those positions. So you do include information about your job history and then your education. But you don't have all those accomplishments tied necessarily to a position. The big caveat about functional resumes is that most professionals in the human resources field, they don't like them. They are suspicious of people who do functional resumes. So they're really not that great in trying to apply to an advertised position, but they're wonderful in the networking situation, and they're wonderful as leave-behinds after you've already made some sort of an impression. So there is a little bit of a two-edged sword to them in the HR world, and I want to speak for them, but that's the feedback that I get there. That it's harder for them to understand who you really are. At least that's the feedback I get.
Sounds like there's a real challenge there to communicate who you are through that other approach.
Yeah, if you really are trying to change careers and go in very different directions, all the things that Malika and Ellen have said about networking are just exponentially more important.
That sounds like good advice. We have one other item that kind of came up here that's around behavioral interviews. This is something where people are asking, as I understand it, for some of your past experience and what are some of the things you have done around some of the competencies, the skills that they're looking for. Is that still something that's around, Bob?
Oh, very much so. The people who are doing the interviewing want to know some stories, things that you've done. So I often tell people, create some stories for yourselves in terms of what were the high points of your career. What are the things that really stand out as wonderful accomplishments and things you look back on very fondly? And then for yourself, describe what was the challenge you faced at that time, what were the actions you took, and what were the results. So as somebody might say, well, Bob, tell me about a time when you were able to really solve a difficult problem. I've got a story to tell, and I'll tell them what the challenge was, what was the problem, what were the actions I took, and then what was the results, how successful did it turn out. And that's what they're really looking to hear. They want to get some more context and some more feeling for how you really do the jobs that you do. But their behavioral interviews are very, very popular.
Good. I'm glad to hear it because stories, many people can tell their story more powerfully in that venue than putting it in a resume. Great.
Yes.
So I want to thank again each of the presenters, and as a closing note, I hope that everyone who listens to this webinar, who views it, finds that it's truly helpful. IEEE USA Employment and Career Services wishes you all good luck in managing your career, whether you are looking for a job, looking for a new position within your same company, or just wondering, what can I do to stay in charge? So good luck for all, and good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank all of you.
Good.
See your red button. Does that mean we're turned off?